Hi, everyone. I'm Lady Runa. I hail from the barony of Stierbach, and we're going to be learning how to make small pointy things today. Specifically, we're going to be working through 3 designs of trefoil pins, and I have an extant, and I have a class handout as well. I'll be sure to link that. It's a Google Doc. But we're going to be doing 3 styles of trefoil pins today and learning a little bit about working with copper alloys and how to make pins. So the stuff that we'll be learning today applies to brass in general. We're going to be working with a really small gauge brass today to make our pins, but you can scale this up if you wanted to use the same motif or a similar motif or something like that to make a dress pin or a hairpin or anything like that. But for the purpose of this class, we're going to be doing veil pins. I have a very helpful cat over here who is the worst teaching assistant, I must tell you. So I actually have a 2-camera setup, so I'm going to go ahead and switch. These are large versions of the styles of pins that we're going to be making today. As we all know, if we've been doing this for a little while, we know that pins are pretty much found everywhere. They're found in all parts of the world, in all sorts of fashions and uses, from your hair to dresses, anything you could think of, and every material as well. There's bone, gold, brass, bronze, silver, wood, all kinds of things. Today, like I stated, I'm going to be doing my demonstration with brass. I hope a couple of you are following along, and if so, I demand that I see your work. We'll come to a couple stopping points when I can see your pieces. Specifically, brass is composed of copper and zinc and sometimes a couple of other metals. Often if you're looking at extants from museums, they will just list copper alloy because it's copper and a whole hootenanny of other metals. So that would be brass or bronze would be your best bet in that case. Brass is a little less expensive and much easier to get your paws on. So that's generally why I work in brass. So brass is a metal that is able to be work hardened, which means that it can be hardened with friction, and it can be annealed, which means it can be softened with heat. When you purchase it, it comes in several states. The wire that I'm going to be working with today is called dead soft, which just means it's the softest that that metal can possibly get. You can probably make these pins using brass out of up to, I would say, an 18 gauge wire without needing a torch to heat it up. Otherwise, because you're bending the wire, you're going to be applying friction to it, and then the metal's going to get harder. So I'm using, this is about 22 gauge dead soft brass wire. This is just from Rio. Boop, boop. You can pick this up. They have so many options now at just like local craft stores for metalworking. So this is about the scale of wire that we're going to be working with today. And it bends really easy now, but once we're done with it, it won't. I will show you the first pins that we are going to make today would be these big ones here. It's just going to be our basic trefoil, but the scale that I am going to do them on is, come on now, this big. I have an extant listed in my class handout, and that extant is a 14th century example that was found on the grounds of a monastery. So we're going to go over tools really briefly. And I'm going to show you what I'm going to be using for that. So first thing, like I showed you previously, we need wire. And again, this is about 20 to 22 gauge. I have made these exact pins in many different gauges of wire. But like I said, the larger your wire gets, you're going to need the use of a torch. And we're not going to be doing any torch work today. So we got wire. We're going to need a variety of pliers and cutters. So we're going to use round nose pliers. I think a lot of us are familiar with those. The sort of beak of the pliers have rounded cones on them. And then we also have what are called chain or flat nose pliers. So they're flat and smooth on the inside. And that allows us to hold the wire that we're working on, and we won't put any kinks or gouges or burrs into it. See. Okay. And then we're going to need something to cut our wire with. This is just a little pair of diagonal cutters. We are also going to need a, if you're following along, we're going to be using some small beads, but I'll get to that as well. This is my little anvil block or bench block. It's just a piece of steel and it's heavy. And you can use something like this or a comparable heavy surface. I also have a quartz tile that I sometimes use. And even because these pins are so small and we don't want to mush them when we're hammering them, you could even use like a piece of wood too. But there are going to be dents left in the wood after you're done. So don't use like your dining room table or anything. To sharpen our pins, we've got, you can use like 300 grit sandpaper. Okay, this one's 220, but that'll work. And, or some needle files. And these only work in one direction, but we'll get more to how to use these when we get to the sharpening part of our pins. And then it's hammer time. This is a nylon hammer. So this applies friction to our wire, but does not mush it. So it doesn't squish the wire. It will apply friction and harden the metal, but the nylon ends are soft enough that it won't flatten your wire or anything. Okay. Any questions so far? You can always put questions in the chat. I can answer them either now or when we're done. It really just depends on if I see them. So we're gonna
I don't see anything in the chat, so keep rolling.
Beautiful. Okay, please feel free to stop me, like I said, if you have any questions. So first, what we're going to do is the basic trefoil. And learning the basic trefoil is the base for all the other pins that we'll be working on today. Step in the class handout. So when you're doing this at home without me on camera, it's pretty simple to do. So what we're going to be doing is first making a loop on the top here. Then we're going to curve around and make a second loop. And the tail of that loop is going to go towards the back. And then we're going to make our third loop. And the tail of that loop is going to curve towards the front. This gives us a very flat piece. It's not going to buckle on us or lay oddly. It's fairly flat and true to our extant. So first loop on the top, second loop, tail curves to the back, third loop curves to the front. Okay. So now I'm going to show you it in real time with our teeny weeny wire. A lot of people ask me, how do you know what length to make your pins? There are so many different lengths of pins. It's really personal preference. If you wear garb that has a headdress or has a veil or something like that, you kind of get the idea of how long to make your pins. Mine, I end up, they're probably 1.5 inches to 1.75 inches when they're done. But you can make these longer or shorter. And these will slide very nicely through like silk, cotton, and I even sometimes put them through like tape, and they work quite well. All right, so we're gonna grab our round nose pliers first. And for neatness sake, when we initially cut our wire, and this is something you don't have to do, I just like to do it because I feel like it makes a neater piece. There's sort of this little burr here. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, that little burr there at the end. I like to flatten that out with my needle file. So that way the wire is totally flat and flush. They do make things called flush cutters. And they are somewhat successful at their chosen job, but I still feel that you need to use needle file. So I'm using the needle file here to flatten out the top. And when I do that, the needle file only works when it goes in one direction, and that's a direction away from you. So you can't scribble back and forth with this because you're just going to destroy your needle file. You just need to push it away from you. Let's take a look. Okay, just a few passes with the needle file has flattened it pretty well. All right, so we're going to grab our chain nose pliers, and the size of your trefoils will depend where on the pliers you grab it. So I like to keep my trefoils circles fairly small. So I grab it pretty close towards the end, and what we're going to do is make a loop. Make it come all the way around. See? And now we have our first loop. Fairly straightforward, right? So remember, for our second loop, what we're going to do is curve the tail of that loop towards the back of the piece. So if this is the front of the piece, we're going to curve it towards the back. So I'm going to grab roughly where I want the center of my next loop to be, and I'm going to sort of push the wire around with my hands. So that way I have a better sense of what I'm doing. Okay, so now we have our second loop and it's gone towards the back. And now we're going to shore up that little loop because it's a little wonky. It's less a loop and more a lemon. And then we're going to make our third loop, which is going to come around and cross towards the front and go down. So we're going to grab about this where we think the center of our next loop is going to be. Remember, I'm coming the same distance down here with the pliers, so that way all my loops are roughly the same size. And then I'm going to pull my wire around. Okay. Now, this can very easily be, that's not truly perfect, but we can very easily shore that up by taking our little chain nose pliers and kind of squishing our little trefoil. Okay, and straightening up our little loops there. And that looks pretty cool, doesn't it? Okay. So we're going to take this pin from start to finish. So that way you know the process for making one whole pin. And then I'm going to show you the variants for making the pin. And that includes one where it has a spiral top and one where it has a beaded top. So I'm going to cut this pin off where I think it should be cut. Let me get my little wire cutters here. Okay. So what we're going to do is file this first, and then we're going to work harden it. I don't know why I like to do it this way. I just do. So we're going to grab our pin and sort of hold the tip of the pin here, sort of sticking off the edge of our finger a little bit. And we're going to use our file to then file off the tip here, because we're creating a taper at the end that will very easily slide through our chosen veil material. Okay, remember, pushing it away. We're not scrubbing. We're just pushing it away. Again, this can also be done with sandpaper. You don't need a needle file for this. Okay. And then when I feel like this side that I've gotten is fairly sharp, I'm going to flip it over and do the same thing to the other side. Again, pushing it away from us. Okay, and then I'm going to do it. If I did it on the north and south, I'm going to do it on the east and west tip of the pin. So if you can see, I kind of made it like a, it's like a wedge right now. It's flat on two sides. And now I'm going to do the other two sides. Same procedure. I'm just going to hold the pin at the tip of my finger and push the needle file away. And whoop, one more side. Okay. And that gives us a fairly nicely sharpened tip there. Okay, so now to work harden our pins. I will say this before I harden. I often get the question, do these pins bend? And the question, or the answer is yes, they do bend. Thus is the nature of this metal. If you were to use steel or something like that, it would be much more brittle, but much harder. So while these do bend, they very easily bend back. And every time they bend a little bit, they get a little stiffer. For the veil and head wrap that I wear, I actually don't mind that these pins bend and flex a little bit, because it sort of flexes to the curve of my head. And I find that a little more comfortable and they don't wiggle around. Having this large trefoil top helps significantly as opposed to a round pin, because a round pin is just going to roll on you, but this is flat and it's going to stay. So on to work hardening. So I've got my little anvil block here and there's some cat hair stuck to it. But what I like to do is take my nylon hammer. Let me center that so y'all can actually see. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to sort of hold the pin part, or I'm going to hold the head of the pin and just keep the pin part on my little bench block here. And I'm going to tap it. It is a tapping. You don't want to smash this thing, you know, with your hammer. You're just going to flatten it. So, and then when you flatten it, you're just going to make it sort of fragile and brittle, and we don't want to do that. So we're going to tap. I'm going to lightly tap. Hopefully it won't be too loud for everybody, but there we go. And I'm going to do this on all sides of the pin, just like I did with the filing. So then I'm going to flip this guy over and tap. Flip it on the side. Tap. And flip on the other side. Okay. And then I'm going to give a couple of taps to the trefoil. Both sides. And we are done. We made a pin. Pretty cool, huh? Okay. Now we are going to move on to making the spiral topped pin. And I find a lot of these spiral topped pins in like Hallstatt finds, some Latien finds. But these could also very easily be used for later period as well, because we still have that trefoil. So same procedure as before, but instead of creating just a loop at the top, we're going to make a spiral. And I have this in my class handout as well. So we're going to create a tight spiral, and I'm going to show you how to create a nice tight spiral. And then we're going to do second loop, which then curves to the back, and third loop, which then curves to the front. And I have some examples of previous little spiral headed pins that I've done. Let me see. And this is actually one that I've also done in a larger scale too. So this is probably either a 16 or a 14 gauge brass wire. But this one I had to use a torch for. Boop. Okay. So we're going to get our wire. And pretend that I flattened the top of this wire. But for demonstration purposes, I will not. But pretend I flatten it. Pretend it's in focus. Okay, there we go. So to create a very tight spiral, what we're first going to do is sort of curve over the tip of our wire here with the very tip of our flat nose pliers. And we want this to be super teeny tiny. Remember, we're not going to create a loop. We're just going to create a small hook. Okay. And now the goal with this little hook is that we are going to crush it in on itself. And our flat nose or chain nose pliers are really good for that. So and it's a little bit fiddly. So don't get discouraged if you're trying to do it. Also, don't pinch the meat of your finger either. That hurts. I'm going to try something, and I'm going to hold it with my other pliers. I'm going to try to crush it that way. So that way it can stay flat. No. Okay. I think I made my hook a little bit too open, so that's okay. We can go back and curve that hook just a little bit more. Yeah, that should work a little better for us. Okay, see how we're kind of crushing that hook a little bit? And I'm moving my chain nose pliers and making sure I push that totally in on itself. And I use my flat nose pliers here to sort of flatten it down and make sure that nothing has gone wonky. And then I'm going to hold that teeny little hook there that we made. And I'm going to push the rest of my wire around to make the rest of the spiral. Slow and steady wins the race here. We're just going to keep grabbing and then pushing here with our thumb. I like to feel the resistance of the wire, and this is especially important when you start working with larger gauge wire, because you can feel it hardening while you're pushing it. So we're going to make sure that we make a little spiral that is approximately the size of the loop that we're going to do with our trefoils. There we go. That looks about right. Okay. And then again, same procedure as before. We're going to create our second loop, and tail's going to come to the back. Third loop, and tail's going to come to the front. And we're going to use our round nose pliers. Oop. Okay. Push. That goes to the back. And then pull. This goes to the front.
That one is extra wonky. My goodness. That's okay because we're gonna zhuzh it. Okay. And there we go. We have our spiral trefoil pin. Now I could go back in here and make these loops a little less lemony and a little more rounded if I want. Because they do look a little infinity symbol, don't they? And then the procedure would be the exact same, where you file the tip of the pin and then you would harden it. Bonk, bonk, bonk with your little hammer. You don't have to hit it too terribly hard, just enough to apply a little bit of friction. There we go. Okay. So now on to the third pointy beast. We are going to be doing the same trefoil pin, but the top loop is going to be a bead. See? Here's my big version. So we're going to create a teeny little hook like we did before, and that's going to be the stopper for our bead. And then make a loop. Yeah. And then, sorry, my partner was talking to me. The loop that comes to the back. And then comes, and then the third one comes to the front. Okay. So unless you have what's called a bead reamer, which is basically like a small file solely for the purpose of making larger holes in beads, I would suggest taking whatever wire you're going to use and taking it to the craft store or wherever you get your beads and making sure that it's going to fit. Because I can tell you from experience that picking up a beautiful bead and then going, no, when it doesn't fit your wire is pretty tragic. So this is more of an, this is like a lumpy little dark pearl, but the round one over here is a malachite bead. Okay. So I have both some little malachite beads and I think some faceted garnets, which are not period, but they're too cute to really ignore. So we're gonna use the garnets. So same procedure to start as we did with our spiral. First, we're going to flatten that little bird end, that way it looks nice, and then we're gonna make our hook. When you're doing the bead one, I would encourage you to make this hook as small as possible, just because it looks a little more finished. So what we're gonna do is grab the tip of this with our round nose pliers, make our little hook. Okay. And then we are going to crush that hook in on itself, just like we did for the spiral. And go. Okay, there we go. I'm going to keep crushing it till we get it nice and small and make sure it's flat. Okay, so that is our little bead stopper there. We're going to put our little garnet on there. Maybe not that garnet. Okay. Take two. Take two, garnet. No. Oh, it's like the garnets heard me or something. No, it's going to be a malachite bead kind of day. Okay, here we go. Okay. Do they tell you what the gauge is of the hole in the bead? Sometimes. If you're getting your beads from a bead supplier or a jeweler's supply or something like that, they will generally tell you the sizes. If you're going to your craft, like a local craft store, generally not. You're just going to have to eyeball it. But again, picking up a bead reamer, which are fairly inexpensive, and like I said, they're like long little round files to sort of bore out the inside of a bead or a pearl or a bone bead or something like that, to make it a little bit wider to fit your metal. Okay, so we have our bead here, and that's our top loop. So we're going to go ahead and make our second loop, just like we have before. This is a little trickier because the bead likes to move around. Yes. See, and you can get bead reamers at a lot of craft stores now. I know the last time I went to Michael's, they had some as well. See, they're starting to carry all this metalwork stuff because it's awesome, and I'm happy. Anywho, I like to kind of tip this down so that way gravity is going to keep that bead as far down at the end as it can, so that way it doesn't get in the way of me looping here. So we're just going to grab a wire. Oops. Loop it towards the back. Okay. That didn't loop all quite the whole way, so we're going to grab it again. Okay. And then we're going to grab here, loop it to the front. I'm going to grab my flat nose pliers here to kind of grab my little trefoil and pull the end out. But you get the idea. And again, we can zhuzh and fix our little trefoils to make them nice and purty. And then again, you'd follow the same procedure. You would trim it however long you wanted it to be. Use your needle file or sandpaper to make the end pointy, and then bonk it lightly with a hammer. Now, in order to stop from crushing your bead, ask me how I know. When you're holding this over the edge here, just be very gentle. I obviously haven't trimmed this pin, but be very gentle with your hammer. I tend to kind of hold the bead here with my thumb, so that way when I'm lightly tapping, if I get too close over here, I'm just going to tap my thumb. I'm not gonna potentially shatter my bead. And there we go. So now that we are all incredibly dashing and daring metalsmiths, I would encourage you, if you haven't already played along, I would encourage you to work on these because they're small and easy to make, fairly inexpensive and incredibly satisfying, and really help. Headgear always helps complete a look regardless of what period you play in. And I feel like these pins help take it a long way. So thank you guys. I know we had some questions.
Yes, thank you. I was wondering, could you show us how those pins are used? I'm assuming they're with veils or something like that.
Yes, and quite frankly, this really depends on the style of veil that you wear. These are small and indiscreet, especially if you just do the spiral or the regular trefoil. So they can be used in like one of the base layering pieces, like a Brigida's cap or something like that. I'll go run and grab my stuff really quick. Like I'm not gonna grab the whole shebang because it's like a thing, but I'll kind of show you how I get everything to stick to my head. So just bear with me one second. I hope that that was helpful for anybody. Yeah, as Thorgrim says, there's no wrong wire. Like I said, there are extents found for pins in every material you could think of, through every period. I tend to do more early period stuff. And so we see a lot of copper alloys like brass and bronze, a lot of gold, things like that. But mama ain't got gold money, so we work in brass. But I'm gonna kind of show you my quick and dirty headgear here. So I don't wear a Brigida's cap. I just kind of wear kind of like a tied headband here. Normally my bangs are back. Hold on one sec. I know a lot of people don't like wearing headgear because it slides or it falls off or it seems complicated, and I understand those feels, but I can tell you that a base layer such as like a Brigida's cap or even a headband like this, and then putting your veil or your wrap on top of that is the way to go. So this is just some fabric tape here, and it has some narrower fabric tape at the end. And then I wrap it around the base of my head where I want my wrap to go. My hair is in a ponytail, so it's going to look a little odd. Okay. And this is going to give our base layer, so that way our wrap and then our final headband aren't going to move as much. Because, like I said, it's a pain in the butt if you do all this work and you're like, wow, my headgear looks good. And then 20 minutes later, it's like on the back of your neck. So see, I bring this fairly far forward on my forehead just because it sits well, you know, and it's not going to slide back. So then after this, I would do like my veil or my head wrap. I just grabbed a quick piece of linen as my head wrap right here. And grab this. So like this works for Iron Age, Slavic, or Baltic, Viking, Hiberno Norse, Viking, all kinds of things. So I try to line it up. Oh, everything's mirrored. It's so odd. Okay, so I line it up so it's nice and smooth here. And then I'm going to take my pins. Which, as you can see, are my trefoil pins here. I don't just make them, I use them too. Okay. And then these pins, I'm going to go sort of across my head. So they're going to be perpendicular to my head. And these little brass pins are able to go through this lightweight linen and this fabric tape very easily. And I don't know how easily y'all can see that, but there she is. You can also do them vertical as well. It really depends on your headgear, honestly. And
Would they normally be just like a couple that are worn, or would there be lots of them in a single, headpiece?
that's a great question. It honestly depends on the style that you're going for, the period that you play in. There are some later period hairstyles that have, or veils and things that can have like hundreds of pins.
That's a lot.
That is a lot, I know. Like I said, I play earlier periods, so generally, like this one is going to be kind of modeled after a Merovingian head wrap thing, which is like fifth century, I want to say. I'm really getting tested here, y'all. But this, there's no evidence of any of these like underpins, but there are overpins. For me, for wearing this, I just kind of wear however many makes me feel safe and secure and comfortable, because I don't want this slipping or sliding or falling during the day, especially at events, because generally I'm running around or doing something. Rarely am I in like a beautiful air conditioned area, usually outside running around, handing water to my fighter or whatever. And then this, I just tie back. I'm gonna do a simple wrap like this. So that's just like spiraled in a giant bun on the back of my head. And then I have a decorative band. Like you can see how this would totally work for like Slavic Viking. You could just have like the additional band and then put your little temple rings here. But I have this decorative band that I then put, which is just another fabric tape, and it has some silk and then a little herringbone embroidery in the middle. And this is generally goes right here. And then I tie it. And then this would be a great situation where you could make these pins in a larger gauge. I seem to have given all of mine away, so I'm going to use another set of pins that I have. And these pins, I am going to want something to hold this band on. You could really choose any pin. I'm going to use these larger gauge pins that I have. Let's see. These are fairly big. And then I'm going to put each of those like Boop on either side of my head. And this will pretty much go through all 3 layers. The key is to taper the ends of the pin nicely, so that way it's making a really slick hole in your veil or fabric tape instead of tearing it. Symmetry can be important.
For someone like me who's a real sweater, I could see how that would be very beneficial to have all of that, to collect all that so it's not dripping down your face.
Yes. And it also, because it's kind of big and bulky, at least this style, it helps protect the back of my neck from sun. And yeah, I'm a sweater too. I'm a real hydrated big girl. So this helps a lot. It helps keep me cool because of the linen here. And all of these pins help keep it tight against my head. There are so many different veils and hairstyles and things like that that use pins. We could be here for hours talking about it, to be honest.
That'll be your next class.
Yeah, exactly. Pins throughout history. I do teach another class that goes more into like torch work with brass and stuff like that to get like the big spirals. Like, I don't know if y'all are familiar with like the Hallstatt pieces that have like these giant spirals and things on them. They're really beautiful. But I'm gonna check the chat here. Oh, you made 1 pin out of the wrong wire. What wire did you use? Did you use aluminum?
Copper. It's super soft.
Copper. Okay, so copper can be work hardened. So it can be hardened just like I showed you. Brass is a copper alloy. So it's made of copper and zinc in varying quantities. So you can harden it. It's just a little temperamental, but it is doable. That's how I started learning. Like Thorgrim said, I started using copper because my partner's an electrician, so it's fairly easy for us to get like scraps and things like that. It's easy to get at the craft store as well. So just try. I believe in you. You can do it. Hurrah. I just put in the chat, I just put the link to the Google Doc of my class handout for this class, which has the extant piece that we worked from to make our trefoils, as well as a couple other extant photos that are from earlier period stuff, like Hallstatt era, just kind of showing you how in my research that spiral is fairly timeless and pretty fun to make. So, but if you have any questions at any point, like a month from now, if you're trying to make these pins, you're like, oh, I forgot something, or I don't know how to do this, or what have you, my email is on my class handout. You can message me there. You can also DM me on Facebook. I answer that. So please reach out. I'm not just a teacher for the Zoom time. I'm a teacher at all times. So
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
sure.
Wonderful.
Sure, of course.
Absolutely.
It was
I had
our
a good
very
time.
first recorded class too.
Yay! How exciting! How exciting!
Yes. All right. So it's 8 o'clock and we have time for questions or more talk about pins and wire work or people are free to come and go as they please.
I will be here as long as y'all have questions.
That's fair.
Well, maybe I'll have some questions for your next class because it's the first time I've actually sat in on a wire class. I mean, I did do a class once. It was a ring. We did rings, the Norse rings.
Mm-hmm.
That was the one thing. That was the one thing. I think we just used the wire benders. That was it. We didn't do any of the filing. I don't remember doing anything.
You know,
like
that's really funny because I
or the
sat in with
pounding, the
somebody,
tapping.
yeah, I sat in with somebody on a class and we made the rings, and we also didn't do any of the tapping or the filing down the ends. We made the
Right.
spiral rings, so you always had this little sharp end that you couldn't
Yep.
quite.
Yep. That was new to me.
Yeah. Night, Jenny.
Good night, Jenny. Yeah.
Yay.
Yay.
That's something that has always frustrated me is I want you to have functional pieces when you're done. I want
Right.
you to feel confident that those pieces, like you could take my class and follow along and be done, and at the end have a bunch of new things to add to your kit. And you know, you don't need to know necessarily any additional skill. So that's important to me.
I think it's really cool because you go to events and I always forget to put anything on my head. Because, you know, as one does when they are on their way to an event, they're probably trying to fix something on the way.
Yes.
Which is hard to do when you're the driver.
Yes.
And then I get there and it's like, I don't have anything again, and I burn easily. And then you see folks with veils or different head wraps, and I'm like, how do you do that? I mean, nobody just volunteer, and you don't want to just, you know, walk up. Even though I talk to everybody, that's not going to be a thing I'm going to do, especially since they're all clean and neat. And like yourself, I've been running everywhere helter skelter, and I do not want to share that part of myself with them onto their garb and say, how do you make your head so pretty?
There's yes. Oh, thank you. I feel like I think there's just a period head forum on Facebook that I'm thinking of. But a standard veil is either a circular piece of fabric or like a half circle piece of fabric, and it's literally draped upon thine head. And you know, if you're able to wear a net or a circlet or something like that, you can just go funk, you know, and stick that over, and that, especially if it's long enough, it'll help protect your neck, it'll help protect your shoulders, it'll mop up some of the sweat depending on the occasion.
I think the one time I actually managed to wear a head wrap but I was working in the outdoor kitchen for the week, so it was utilitarian, not pretty. Well, I love the way they look. Yeah, yes, it is.
Yeah.
I love the way they keep horseflies from biting you.
Yes.
And deer fly that always go for the hair. If you can hide the hair, the flies stay away.
Absolutely. I mean, this is literally just a piece of linen. It's a square piece of, it's more rectangular piece of linen. And then I just wrap it up, and you can see there's a big old bun in the back of my head. This is just one way to wear it. Like I said, I do early period stuff, but there's so many beautiful like goffered veils and things like that for later period personas that are just stunning. And what I've learned by talking to all of them is the key is to have a base layer or like a tight cap to your head, like a Brigida's cap or something like that. and then pin stuff to that, and then it won't move on you. So
And
Right.
that's
That way
something
you're
that
not
we've
pinning
never
it to your
done.
hair.
right. I mean, our hair is slippery, and
Yeah.
then if we're in an outdoor event, and if you're like me, you're gonna sweat,
Mhm.
and you know
It'll loosen up.
exactly. So this is
Some of
pinning
us
to
have
fabric.
thin hair or
Absolutely,
fine textured hair. And
absolutely.
I can't get bobby pins to stay in my hair.
Ooh, this will stay.
I have
So-
yet to do anything besides take a piece of linen and wrap it around my head, kind of turban style, because I've just been too lazy to learn all the cool things that are, and this is the first time like I've seen it where I was like, oh, that would be functional, because I was never really attracted to the veil, because in my first thought was like, I need something wrapped around my head to collect the sweat. And
Mhm.
so this is like that would be functional for me. And so I didn't know that it
As
was a
someone
thing.
with a Brigida's cap, they are so comfortable to wear. And like you make two of them and you can just switch out as you like wash one in the sink and you're good for forever.
I'm gonna
Mhm.
have to look that up. I feel like I should know what that looks like.
I can dig mine out and show it next meeting.
Okay.
You can even, if you want it, like this is moderately Merovingian, but if you were to take this and then put like a circular veil over it, that could be like court garb, and you could absolutely have like all of this under it, and then you could
Okay.
have an additional layer on top.
So you
Making
wouldn't
it
have to
prettier,
do anything.
right.
You just cover it with a prettier veil.
right.
Cool.
Again, it really depends on your persona and the garb you enjoy wearing. So there's so many different options.
Yeah.
I like it too because it's not a hat. And my first thought of hats is that they would be too hot.
Yeah.
Well, you've all seen my little gardener's hat that I wear everywhere to keep my fair Irish skin fair.
And you could wear this under that. You really could. I do.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited.
I'm glad.
Yeah. Because I've got all the stuff. I got all the stuff and I bought books after I took the class. And then if you don't have somebody who, sits down and shows you,
Mm-hmm.
then you're like, well, I have all this stuff. I have beads, I have wire, I have all this stuff.
Now
I
you have
can do
me.
something. Yes, now I have you. Now I can do a thing.
Yeah.
Do a thing.
Make a functional thing too. It's also really good
Yes.
for largesse.
I was thinking that.
Yes. I've given them as elevation gifts, all kinds of stuff. Yeah. They're like, I don't know if I'm
How many would you give as like a minimum set?
I give them in 5s or 10s usually. And it really depends on, again, the period. If I'm giving it to a later period persona, I'm going to give at least 10. 10 is a good rule of thumb. But in here, for the smaller pins, I only have like 4 or 5. So
What's the longest pen shaft length that you would make for any of the pens? I mean, since I'm not familiar with the different period pens. Like 3 inches or something like that.
for the smaller pins, I would keep it. Hold on, let me get a ruler. For the smaller pins, I would keep it under 1.5 inches.
Oh, okay.
Only because the more the better.
Got it.
Yeah. And but like I have, these larger decorative
Gauge.
pins right here, the larger gauge ones. Like I just have 2.
Okay.
And
Right, and but I meant like for the length of the shaft, are they normally kept short like that, or do you have some pins that are like quote unquote like a hat pin from more modern eras where they tend to be really long?
Yeah, hats do tend to be very long, like 3 inches.
Yes, and honestly, I see a lot of veil pin sellers selling pins that large as well, so there has to be a use for them.
Okay.
These are about 2.5 inches here. And I also sometimes, depending on how froggy I feel, I will use like a long pin and stick it in the bun here in the back for some extra hold.
Okay.
So you could do something like that as well.
Awesome.
It really depends. I love pins because they're so versatile, and you can make them any size, any length, and you will find a function and a purpose for them. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I found my Brigida's cap if anybody wants to see it.
Yes, show and tell.
Please.
Okay. Let me get video and see if I have lights anywhere. Sorry. Maybe not. Maybe not. Okay. So this is not the very,
Oh, yes.
if I can figure out directionality, I'm having so much more sympathy for your difficulty getting your veil in place.
Right? Because you're like, wait, which way
Think
does it?
it's like a coif, but gathered at the very bottom.
Mhm.
Where it would be sort of square on a coif, I've sort of gathered it together. And then the ribbon is one solid line. You can make it so that it splits, but making it a single length actually makes it easier to do, wrap it around your head.
No.
So let me get that out of the way, shove my hair underneath. But you make it so that it's roughly the right size for your head. And then in the back, I just twist the ribbon over and wrap it around my head and then wrap it back around my head. So no tying or knots needed.
Fantastic. Now, what is
Shazam.
the ridge line in the middle?
That is, some of them have like decorative lace.
Mm-hmm.
So I just, I cheated. I did not make my lace. I got a line of lace and sort
No
of,
judgment. No judgment.
so if you can sort of see.
Oh yeah.
Oh, nice.
So it's just,
Cool.
I've seen them decorated like on all the sides with embroidery sometimes and all sorts of things. So, I mean,
Is that early period? And what culture is that?
British Isles
Okay.
and Brigida would be like Bridget,
Okay.
like towards the more Irish end of
Okay.
Right.
a lot of times, but relatively not super early period.
Okay.
Good.
I can't remember exactly when, but we're,
A lot of 14th century
yeah.
does
That
the Brigida's cap, 12th century, 13th century.
There you go.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I can't get it nice and snug again.
But there are similar
Uh-huh.
caps
There we go.
found other
Cultures.
cultures. Yeah. What's your interest?
Well, I was doing Viking for a long ass time, and I just didn't ever pay attention to headgear for that. But now I'm in the Mongol thing, and so, I mean,
Okay.
of course, it's really cold in Mongolia, so they wear fur hats, and I'm not going to
Right.
be wearing a fur hat when it's summertime. So I don't really quite know.
Well, most cultures have a working class and have some sort of utilitarian head covering. And then you have the higher classes that have decorative head covering. So there's got to be more in there than just the fur, especially because, there's got to be something like a cap style underneath it. I'm not familiar enough with Mongolian to really know, but there are so many, they're just everywhere. Caps are
Well, the
everywhere.
good news is that they incorporated cultures from everywhere all the way to Turkey,
Right.
and so I could wear another hat and be fine and get away with it.
Well,
Another,
You could
hairpiece.
probably wear a head wrap like this, honestly. Like what time period?
1200s.
Yeah, you could very easily wear something like this.
Okay, yeah, because they made it all the way to Eastern Europe, so
Yeah, you have lots of options then.
right.
Well, according to this article, it says this cap, because I'm just now fascinated about when it started. It says images of similar looking caps can be found in many 13th and 14th century manuscripts. While most images of women wearing only a cap during the day appear to be servants, it's not inconceivable that many of the upper class women will be wearing it under their wimple and veil. So yeah, it goes back to about 13th, 14th century. So
The
there's
Brigida, correct?
yeah, the
Yeah.
Brigida. Yep. So
And they're fairly easy to make a basic one.
Mhm.
oh, very cool.
Well, thank you, Runa. This has
Thank
been
you
great.
so much, Runa.
Of course, anytime. Please reach out. It won't be awkward. I promise. I'll remember you. Please.
Yay.
I didn't even
Yay.
we didn't scare you away. So
No, I'm pretty hard to scare.
Good.
So
we like to find those ones.
we're impervious.